Visit sayrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. We are in the process of reupholstering the sailboat. This is one of many videos showing how to reupholster each one of these applications. In this short tutorial video, we'll be recovering a folding seat cushion. The fabric wraps around the foam and is stapled on the back side. Let's get started. The first step is removing the old fabric cover, and we're going to reuse the foam.
This is going to be a very short tutorial video. Basically, this is a cushion that has boxing that goes all the way around the perimeter and is just seamed together here in the middle. It's sewn to a top plate. And on the bottom side, it's attached to a backer board via staples. So we're going to replace the fabric. So this is one of my favorite staple removers that's available from Sayrite, and that's how easy this job is. Let's remove all the staples and I'll show you what's next. Okay, the staples have been removed, and this gets screwed onto a platform that folds up. So it would fold like this, so the seam's on the bottom. Because of that, we're going to try to use the same screw holes for the platform. So that means the seam that's over here should be over here on the backer board. So now we can remove this fabric backing, and notice how they folded the fabric back with a hem around the perimeter to make it look good on the back side. That's just good to take note of. So there are a couple ways you can do this. You can either use the old fabric as a pattern and do it that way, or you can measure around the perimeter and cut your own boxing and plate to size. This has been glued on, and we'll just leave it on the backer board. Notice the backer board edges have been sanded so they're not nearly as sharp. That way it keeps from penetrating the fabric.
We'll be measuring the old foam, and then we'll be cutting a top plate and a boxing strip.
We're using a 100% acrylic fabric called Outdura. This is the outside surface. The back side is coated with a latex because this is a fairly open weave fabric. And we're going to cut the top plate first. So we're just going to position it over top of our fabric. Then we're going to trace around this to determine the size of our top plate. And notice it's slightly larger, but it's basically the same size as the foam, maybe just a 1/4 inch or so larger around the perimeter. So I'm pretty close to the foam, and we'll go all the way around like this. This is the arrow where our seam goes, so I'm just going to put a little line there indicating where the seam should be for the boxing. So we're going to cut this out with the Sayrite Edge hot knife, and this has the precision cutting foot and blade on it, so I don't have to use any cutting glass on the bottom. This will prevent the unraveling of the fabric as we cut it out right on top of our line. So if we measure the height of our foam and the backer board, we get 4.5 inches. I'm going to add about 2.5 inches so that we have enough to wrap it to the backer board and create that hem. So we're going to go 7 inches for our boxing width. Now I'll take a soft tape measure and I'll measure from that seam arrow, making sure that I'm not compressing the foam all the way around to determine the length of the boxing that we need. So like this. And what is that measurement? At least 48 inches. I'm going to go 51 inches just to be safe. Okay, we've already used our chalk and marked on the underside of this Outdura acrylic fabric, and we're using the hot knife to cut it out. Now, do you have to use a hot knife? No, you don't have to. You could use scissors, but the edges may unravel a little bit more. This just helps prevent it from unraveling.
Now we're going to seam the boxing and clip it in place to the top plate.
This is our boxing, and I have the wrong side down and the outside up. I'm going to take my clear acrylic ruler and I'm going to place it on a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to strike a line with my chalk pencil right there at a 1/2 inch. And then we're going to take our plate, this is the side with the seam, and I'll transfer that seam to the front side, and we'll turn it over. And I'm actually going to base things before we take it to the machine and sew. So I'm going to go around the perimeter with the 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery. You don't want to use anything wide because you don't want to sew through this double-sided tape because that would make it visible when you turn the cushion cover right side out. So we get really close to the raw edge. And this is not a rubber-based glue, it's an acrylic glue. So it prevents the glue from becoming yellow over time, which could bleed through lighter fabrics and show the color of the double-sided tape. I like to use the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to adhere the double-sided tape well, because this is an acrylic. It's stain resistant, water resistant, and it's also glue resistant. So this helps the glue to stick really well. I'm going to peel back the transfer paper, revealing that glue, and this is the seam area. I don't know if you can see my chalk, but it's right there. We're going to take this, and this is our boxing, and we're going to turn it so right sides are facing each other, and I'm just going to put that chalk mark right there so that we can join that up. Now these edges are not totally 90-degree turns. They're gradual, so I don't really cut anything into them unless I need to. Sometimes I cut little slits into the fabric to allow it to go around the corner, but I think this is actually doing pretty well without having to cut slits in it, as you can see. So basting makes it a lot easier to just take it to the machine and sew around it. So now that we have it basted around the perimeter, this is the 1/2 inch here, so I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch from this one, and this panel would go over that and be sewn right here with a stitch. So we need a 1/2 inch, which is about right there. So this is our cut line right there. We'll be sewing it together here. So I'm using the clear acrylic ruler to make sure that I cut this line perpendicular to that edge, and this should be perpendicular. And we're going to cut on this side of the line because I'm a little bit off of that 1/2 inch, and we'll use the hot knife to do that. You can actually use the hot knife because of this foot and not have to worry about hurting fabrics underneath, though I don't usually lay it right on top of the fabrics underneath, but look at this. It's pretty cool. Get rid of that. Now all we have to do is join these two together like this at the machine. One way to make this job really easy is to use the double-sided tape along that edge that you're going to sew together, peel off the transfer paper, and then pre-baste it, so you don't even have to worry about things lining up perfectly. Now you can just take it to the machine and sew it down.
Okay, next we're going to start our sewing.
We have the magnetic guide in at a 1/2 inch, the needle's in center position, and we're sewing about a 4mm stitch length, and I will do some reversing here at the beginning. Now your basting that you did all around the perimeter will more than likely come up, but we'll just take it back and rebaste it again. It's pretty easy. So we'll just sew at the beginning and do some reversing, and at the end, and now that's done. Now I'm rebasting it here around the perimeter, which is pretty easy, but one way that you can assure that it doesn't come up even when you're doing the seam here is use some of these new clips that we are now carrying at Sailrite. Man, they are very aggressive and they are very rubbery, so they actually work really well. And this would hold it where you've seamed it well, because remember, again, this is an acrylic, and acrylics don't like glues. Okay? We're going to sew a 1/2 inch around the entire perimeter. And here when we come to our seam, you can either butterfly it or lay it flat. I'm just going to lay it flat like that. And when we get to a corner, we're going to remove the clips, and we're going to make sure that we sew in the seam allowance so that there are no wrinkles in the seam allowance area. In other words, the area to the right of the needle. So when I get here, I work out my bubbles as best as possible and distribute them, because does have to be bubbles because we're going around a shapely corner. I bury my needle, and sometimes I'll even lift my foot a little bit, and I'll work the fabric so I get as few wrinkles in that area as I possibly can. Cutting slits can help with that, but this is going to work okay. That looks pretty good. Got a wrinkle coming up there, so I'm going to bury my needle. I'm going to lift this, and I'm going to distribute that so that it's not in my seam allowance area, as it's not there. And we just want to sew around all the way around, doing the same thing. Okay, we're almost to the part where we started, and what I want to do is I want to sew over those stitches by about 1 inch and then do a little bit of reversing. Okay, we are done. Okay, we've turned it right side out, and we're going to sew a seam allowance, or we're going to sew a top stitch, I'm sorry, in the seam allowance, and that top stitch is going to be in the boxing. So I roll it over to the boxing side, and we're going to sew through that 1/2 inch. This is a fabric that has a little bit larger weave than most fabrics, and so this top just helps to reinforce that fabric. So I'll start someplace close here to the back middle, and we are going to use the left side of the inside foot as our guide, and we'll just pull the fabric left and right as we sew, making sure that we're sewing through that 1/2 inch seam allowance in the boxing. And we're going to do this all the way around, show you what we do when we get to a corner. So when you get to a corner, you want to go slow and splay that fabric out. We're almost there. So here's our corner. I'm going to splay it out nicely like that. And then just follow that seam. And if I have to, I stop with the needle buried and pull the fabric left and right. And now we worked around the corner. So we're going to do this all the way around. When we get to the beginning, we'll sew over our top stitches and do a little bit of reversing.
And finally, now we staple it to the backer board for a completed cushion.
I've turned it right side out and pushed all the corners out. Now we can insert our foam. Remember, this is where the seam goes. So the seam's right back there. So we'll push this in, and hopefully it's going to fit nice. We'll see. Sometimes the backer board will make this hard. You may have to remove it. It's really hard to get foam inside of there with the backer board, and it's much easier to put the backer board in once the foam is inserted. So don't worry if you rip up a little bit of the foam like that. It's not going to matter. The board goes on back like that. Oh, so much easier. Now I can work things right where they're supposed to go and make sure that all the corners are in the right spot. So see how the corners are off? So all you got to do is just position your foam into each one of the corners. And this could take a couple minutes, so I will show you what it's like when I'm done doing this. So now I'm happy with where the seam is falling and everything is looking pretty good. So I make sure the foam is up in the inside and the backer board goes on with our seam back here. So now it's easy to insert this. And the next job is stapling. Trying to get the backer board in this, and it was way too tight at the corners. So I looked at theirs and I'm like, holy cow, look what the backer board was doing. It actually started pulling or penetrating the fabric at all the corners because the backer board didn't have round enough corners. So because of that, and we saw that here, and it was super tight in here, which I didn't really show, but it was like this. We're going to take this and we're going to round these corners, which will help a ton. So I actually think this was made wrong from the manufacturer. Okay, we rounded the edges of the backer board, and we also sanded them so they're smooth on the top edge, and it fits much better. I'd rather have the foam showing than the board anyway. So there we go. I'm going to start here at the 4 corners, and we'll pull this up and take a look to see if we're happy with the tautness and where the seam is falling, and I think that's pretty good. So we're going to create a single hem here to give it a finished look like that, and then we're going to look at the seam, and that looks pretty good right there. So we'll put a staple here, and we will go to this side. That's typically the way I do it, directly across, and take a look at the seam, create our hem here, pull the fabric taut. That should look pretty good there. Okay, and then we go to the sides and we do that same thing here. Okay, now that we have all 4 tacked down, I'm just going to create a hem around here, and I will put more staples more closely together, but not until I'm satisfied with what it looks like with staples maybe, 2 inches apart or so all around the perimeter. So, and we will do the corners last. Lee, let's go over here and do it. We're using the Sailrite staple gun. We have a short nose, which is this one, and a long nose. I really like the long nose, though we are using the short nose for this video. The nice thing is these have a 1/2-inch crown, which helps to keep the staple from punching through vinyl fabrics. And we've also designed it so that it has a driver that doesn't push the staple too far into fabrics, thus cutting them. So it's a great staple gun. It's obviously pneumatic and requires air. So let's get close to this corner and show you how to do the corner real quick. We're going to go up to that corner, and then what you want to do is you want to pull to make this look good, and you just want to either create something like this that has basically a nice ear like that, or if you want, you could cut some of the fabric out if you're using a really heavy fabric. You just want the fabric to go on the back side so it's not noticeable, and everything on the back is going to be basically concealed. So sometimes I put in multiple wrinkles onto the back to get it to look nice and tight, and I think that looks pretty good there. And I'll put a staple there, pull that, no wrinkles in the front, or I mean on the side. And let's see if we can get this one worked out. Distribute it a little bit. Look at that. That's going to look good. And then we're going to go around the perimeter and put staples closer just so that we have more security. And there's what we did when we were done. We just basically stapled the corners so that I wouldn't have any raw fabric on the underside. Not that anybody sees the underside. And here's what it looks like from the top. And now we can install it on our boat. Okay.
For installation, we'll screw it to the stainless steel folding seat brackets.
So this cushion with the backer board goes right here, like that, and then we just screw through these holes, and we're going to put the seam that's in the back right there. You can't hardly see the seam going to the back like that. So it's going to go on like that. Let's go underneath and screw it in place, and I'll show you how it works. So what I discovered is that the holes actually indicated that the seam goes in the front here. And I see why, because when it's collapsed, you don't see the seam on top. So that makes good sense.
For this seat cushion, we used Outdura upholstery fabric. Outdura upholstery fabric is a solution-dyed acrylic indoor-outdoor performance fabric. It is UV, water, mildew, and stain resistant, and you will find hundreds of styles and colors at the Sailrite website. Be sure to check out the materials and tools list in the description below this video. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.